how do we ensure that as the demands of leadership increase, that we are actually also increasing in the sustaining foundation of intimacy with the Lord? You don't do these things when you're emotionally tapped out. You really do need to be connected deeply in connections with friendships and communities of faith, tapped into the flourishing that God would have for us and the flourishing that we seek to lead and proclaim to others.
What if the very thing that's keeping leaders isolated isn't their schedule, but their fear of being known? In this powerful conversation between ECFA President Michael Martin and Walter Kim, President of the National Association of Evangelicals, we explore the relational cost of leadership and the surprising freedom that comes through biblical vulnerability. Something Walter shared that has really stuck with me is how too often we settle for surface-level transparency that manages our image when what we really need is the kind of Christ-like vulnerability that leads to deeper connection and healing and empathy. This is a conversation every leader needs to hear. So let's dive in.
Well, hey, Walter, it's good to see you. Welcome back to the ECFA podcast.
Michael, thank you for the invitation. Always love connecting with you.
Yeah, always. And I say welcome back because you were actually one of our very first guests ever on the Behind the Seal podcast. So it's great to have you back with us.
Thanks.
Yeah. And, you and NAE have been really just such a great friend to ECFA. And in that vein, I'm excited because today our conversation is about friendship and the importance of spiritual friendship and what that means to leaders. So anyway, it just feels like a perfect tee up to have you here.
That sounds great.
Well, hey, so since it's been a minute since you've been with us, a lot of life has happened here in the last couple of years. I think you and I were reflecting last time that we were together. We're part of, we jokingly sort of call it, we can laugh now, I guess, but the Pandemic Presidents Club, right? So it's like we came into our role right around that season. And boy, in some ways, none of us knew what we were signing up for. But just, catch us up to speed on what's been happening in the last few years. How has, especially leading in such a season of significant disruption and challenge and all those things, how is God using that to shape you as a leader?
Yeah, Michael, yes, absolutely. Pandemic presidency, the challenges that arose, not just with respect to a virus, but with respect to all the disruptions that were happening in society more broadly and in the church, whether it was areas of polarization that are deeply inflected by our political polarization, or broadly cultural, ideological tensions that exist, or racial issues that arose in our country. Even understanding the history of our country became and is continuously contended. And then understanding the place of religion, the kind of rise of those who are not spiritually affiliated, the decline in attendance of church, the difficulties that many churches have had post-pandemic of recovery, and yet also a growing awareness that some of the deep mental health challenges, the deep disconnection of particularly younger generations, are providing an opportunity, maybe a fresh opening for the gospel. And I think for me, since we last met, what has transpired? Yes, all those challenges, both inside and outside of the church and society more broadly, those are all true. But the opportunities are true. And I found that in the last several years, underneath the particular programs and initiatives, and we've had a bunch of programs and initiatives to start, underneath it, though, are a couple of themes that have become really apparent. One is the need for bridge building. Do we take seriously that the gospel is a message of reconciliation that calls people from different backgrounds together? Do we really believe when Jesus prayed in John 17 on the night before he was betrayed for the unity of the church, reflecting the unity within the Trinity and empowering the ministry of the gospel being proclaimed? We show that we are disciples because of this. Do we really believe these things? So, this very important ministry of bridge building, both within the church, but between the church and society at large. And the second thing is this understanding of a gospel that is more comprehensive and beautiful and encompassing than we could ever imagine, and more often than we are ever discipled into. We're really great about our personal discipleship, our personal implications of salvation in Christ. But what are the public dimensions of our faith? And how do we even disciple people into those public dimensions and responsibilities and calling? And that seems to be another big opportunity and challenge, the bridge building and a gospel as comprehensive and a discipleship as comprehensive as all the engagements of our public life. I think these are some of the things that really occupied my attention.
Yeah. I'm grateful that you mentioned that, because I think about even the mission of ECFA. It's like, enhancing trust in Christ-centered churches and ministries, but not just for the sake of enhancing trust, but so that we can more effectively reach the world for Christ. I mean, it's really about, I think, especially on that second point, what you're talking about there with the gospel witness. I think that's huge. I also really resonate, Walter, with what you said about it's in the times of greatest challenge that we also find the greatest opportunities. And just as you were sharing too, not just thinking about, what are the opportunities for our organizations, but also what are the opportunities for us as leaders? It's like when we go through those hard times, that's when we're really squeezed in a lot of ways, like drawn closer into the presence of the Lord. I think we're able to experience more of the formation that He has for us. And so because this is the Behind the Seal podcast, and we kind of go behind the scenes with our friends who are with us, if it's okay, I'd like to just kind of put you on the spot there and say, what has that looked like for you in your leadership? What has it been like to kind of experience some of the opportunities to grow closer to the Lord in the midst of some of these challenging times?
Yeah, I mean, it's so true that we've witnessed in all sorts of public ways, but have also experienced this in our personal networks, that you can have the right strategy, you can articulate the right mission statement, you can even have a thriving program, church, institution, and yet, whether it's a moral failure, or it's burnout, or it's this profound sense of leadership anxiety, the question of what does it take for a person entrusted with the call to lead others to him or herself also be led into the presence of God, be grounded deeply into the rest that we believe is offered in Christ. And how do we ensure that as the demands of leadership increase, that we are actually also increasing in the sustaining foundation of intimacy with the Lord, of friendship with the people of God, of our ability to look at the world as not the enemy, but even as people who also need to be offered friendship. You don't do these things when you're emotionally tapped out. You don't do those things when you do not have the spiritual resources to forgive and to be gracious. You really do need to be connected deeply in rhythms of life, in connections with friendships, in communities of faith, in an openness and posture that is deeply tapped into the flourishing that God would have for us, and the flourishing that we seek to lead and proclaim to others.
I can so relate to that. That's been my experience, certainly. It's like, I guess, at first you sort of walk through some of those hard things, and you maybe, at least me, I'll just be honest, it's like you ask, like, God, why? Why the challenges? Why am I walking through this? But then coming to see it really as an invitation, it's really an opportunity, and staying, like you said, not only very connected to God as a source of grace that allows us to do all the things that, He has called us to do. It's really through His power. But I also appreciate what you said too about there is a connection that is so important to a community, to spiritual friends, those who are around us. God doesn't call us to do any of the work that we do alone. And so I'm curious what that's looked like for you, just as you've taken on some of these additional responsibilities with NAE, and as God's continued to kind of entrust you and your leadership with even more. What does that look like for you in terms of leaning even more into the importance of friendships, connections with those around that can be that kind of support?
Yeah. I think there are two interesting tensions that I'm going to put together and hold together, because it's been my experience. I think with all the travel of leadership, with all the various demands and different communities now that call for attention, and particularly with a network like the NAE, that pulls you in all sorts of directions, right? I need to be both more intentional and planned and scheduled, and more spontaneous and free and open to the moment than I ever before. So with respect to friendships, I need to actually schedule into my calendar weekly, bi-weekly, monthly opportunities for me to connect with mentors, with friends. I just need to book it. Sometimes it means booking several dinners. I have this set of friends that we have this monthly kind of dinner date that we go out or cook at each other's home. And we seek to schedule that out months in advance so that it's in our calendar. And then I have this friend that I have actually, in some way, shape, or form, for the last over 30 years, even though we have lived in different countries and in different states, and continued to live in different states, and haven't lived in the same location for over 25 years. We find times. Used to be every week. It's now moved to every other week. We just schedule it. So it's in my calendar. Opportunities, weekly, bi-weekly, and monthly. So I'm more scheduled than I've ever been before with preserving and spending time with those friendships. But I've also found myself more spontaneous. And I think about my relationship with my sister, whom I love dearly. A wonderful follower of Jesus. I find that just in the cracks in my schedule, as I'm walking from one gate to another at an airport, or I'm on my car ride from the airport someplace else, or in an Uber from one thing to another, finding those cracks of time, not to simply write an email or prep a particular talking point, but hop on the phone to call my sister or a loved one or a friend, and just to catch up, just have a point of connection, just to invite, hey, I'm about to head here. Could you pray for me? I found myself simultaneously more scheduled than ever before in terms of maintaining my friendships or meaningful spiritual relationships, but also more spontaneous than ever before. And both are needed.
Both are needed. Yeah, I appreciate you raising that tension. That's really interesting. I'm also curious, what does it look like for you when those friendships are lacking? What are some of the warning signs or the indicators in you where it's like, hey, it's been a little while since I've touched base with my sister, or like maybe I've started sending more of those emails, like in the, occupying my time, staying busy, getting caught up in the things. Like, what does it look like for you when, or do you start to notice like some warning signs whenever maybe you aren't quite as intentional as you should be with those friendships?
Yeah, that's great. I would say there are a few things, and there's the physical, there's the emotional, and then the spiritual. I'm putting those terms, and get very real with you. There was a period of time where I was starting to actually have some physical symptoms. I have these tingling in my hands, and I was not sleeping well. And I historically I don't necessarily sleep long, but I've never had problems falling asleep and staying asleep. And all of a sudden I went through this stretch of time that I was not sleeping well. I couldn't point to anything. It's not like I was having a recurring bad dream, and this tingling stuff. And I realized that I'm not processing this information with anyone else. It's in my head. And I began to realize, not only do I need to talk to like my doctor and say, hey, this is going on, like what's happening? But I also needed to ask the question, who else in my world, other than my wife, actually knows that this is an issue, can help me process this, can be praying for this? And that's when I began to realize this is not a prayer point on anyone's list. Now, just having divulged this to your entire listenership, maybe all of a sudden I
thank you.
People,
We're all
praying
saying
for
thank
this.
you. Yeah.
But I realized I don't have someone that's actually processing and praying for this.
That's so good.
My spouse. And that's not right, because if I really believe in prayer, and if I really believe that I need people to be praying about a flourishing ministry or the next speaking engagement or whatever, I really need them to be praying for this. The second thing is the emotional thing of, if I ever get to, this is a good sign, if I ever get to the point of feeling like, oh, no one in the world understands me, I'm all alone in this, that is a big sign also that I'm realizing that I've gotten into a particular emotional space that is actually not only not right and true, not healthy, but it's actually robbing opportunities for friendships to deepen, right? It's robbing the opportunity for the community of God to be the community of God. So that's kind of the second thing of like, if I ever feel like I'm alone in this or no one understands, well, that's probably a sign that I'm not taking the time to help people understand, taking the time to remind myself that no, there are plenty of people who love me and are more than happy and eager to walk with me through this.
Isn't the deception there? Yeah, sorry, just going to interject here too. Yeah. Like, isn't it interesting even how I feel like in you sharing that, like there is a level of deception, right? And it's like, I think the enemy would even want to plant those seeds in our minds of like, oh yeah, we're the only one, or, whatever it may be, because if we believe those things, it does keep us from, being in those kinds of relationships that we need to be. So I really appreciate that. Okay, go on. So I think you're going to hit the spiritual.
Yeah, the spiritual thing is, the emotional places it more in the terms of, oh, I feel alone, or, here's this, I don't have anyone to talk to, or, and it's not just, I don't have some guru to talk to, or I don't have a book or a solution to talk to. I don't have someone with whom there is the empathy that may not actually have any idea what to recommend, but expresses the kind of empathy that removes the feelings of isolation and aloneness that often comes with leadership, and often complicates any decision that we have to make. The third thing, the spiritual, for me, it is warning sign, as for warning signs, is if I allow the language of Satan, who is the accuser of the brethren, who stands before the throne of God day and night to accuse the brethren. Or, in the Old Testament, this is imagery of the high priest that in Zechariah was being accused by Satan and kept, in dirty clothing. This relational isolation makes me more prone to the work of Satan, who is the accuser of the brethren. This doesn't make a difference. Who are you to lead in this way? You talk about holiness, but look at your own life. When's the last time you really prayed through this issue? I mean, there are all sorts of ways that I think Satan and my own sin nature conspires to amplify the accusation. To me, that's a huge warning sign. I mean, maybe for others it's not, but I know for me, it's a huge warning sign. if I see myself not saying, oh, that didn't go as well as I had hoped. Maybe even it was a failed experiment, to shifting to, oh, I'm a failure. To making it deeply corrosive to my relationship with God, or producing shame, or producing doubt. To me, those are all huge red flags. And sometimes you just need love with skin. You need a friend to come and tell you, that's ridiculous. I just think you're doing a great job. Or, hey, listen, I don't understand all the dynamics that you're facing, but I want to tell you, God really does love you, and I do as well. And so those are some of the spiritual indicators.
Those are so good. Wow. As you're sharing those, I was just thinking about even some meals you and I have shared together, and we've had some of those moments, of just being able to speak truth into others' lives, and just how powerful that is. I love kind of where you're headed with some of this too. I think a key that you mentioned, like kind of transitioning a little bit into like the how. Yeah. So identifying like we all need these kinds of relationships, but within the how, I think one of the really critical questions is, it really is the who. You're talking about like love with skin on, like the relationships with people. I wonder, what are your thoughts related to just how as leaders, and maybe even speak from your own personal experience, you talked about these different groups and relationships that you're in, but like, how do we really discern who are those right kind of people? And what about too, for leaders who feel like, is there really anyone else out there? What does it look like to find the right who in our lives?
Yeah. I would say there are two aspects to the question. When you ask who is the right who? And one is, am I the right who? And then, can the person become the right who? So I think friendship, we can fall into the same traps that we do with romantic relationships. We just want to know this is the one. And all the sparks happened. The moment you laid eyes on each other, you both knew it was just it. That this is Mrs. or this is Mr. Right, and you just know it. And then you, over the course of life, discover some things. You discover, in my case, maybe this was Mrs. Right, but actually, I have a whole lot of Mr. Right to become still. So
turn the mirror.
Yeah. And then the second thing is, we are not static. So you want marriage, but you also want friendships to grow with you. The friend that you made when you were a single college student, if it's actually going to endure, it needs to morph to when you have dating relationships, or marriage, or children, or when you live in different parts of the country. So in other words, even when you ask the question, who is it that you should be looking for? That who will not remain the same. And that who might be perfect for this particular very small sliver of time. But if that who can't grow and transform, that who won't be the right person later in life, or even maybe 2 months or 2 years later, right? And all of a sudden, if you're so concerned with finding the right who, that you forget that friendship is in two ways, you're not becoming the right who for a relationship that is really thriving. So I would rather control for who I am and what I offer in friendship, and how I seek to help the person love me better, than finding some magical aha friendship that requires no work, that mystically just fits. Maybe God blesses you with that, but I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that's not going to last for long. It's maybe a month, 2 months, maybe 2 years. But at some point, if the friendship doesn't grow with you, and if you don't change and that person doesn't change, the friendship is going to become stagnant. So really, I want to ask that question of, are you capable of being truly vulnerable? Are you capable of listening well? Are you capable of asking good questions and offering disclosure that's emotionally rich. And if you can't, no matter how good the other person is, your friendship is going to be stymied because you're not able to become the kind of friend that would enable the other person to become the kind of friend that would deeply minister to you, and that allow friendship to grow.
This is where we all hit pause, and like we could be done right here with a lot of work to do for ourselves. I'm grateful that you challenged us to do that, to not just think about others, but who do we need to become? Also, I think is just important to ask too, like, what about leaders who are afraid to be real? You talked about the importance of being vulnerable, but I think that's a very real fear that a lot of leaders face, is like, how can I be my real self?
Yeah. I think we are in a culture that has this reinforcing cycle of portrayed success. I mean, you become an influencer on social media because you look good. And even when you're trying to become an influencer because you want to portray yourself as, this bumbling person making it through life that happens to hit on the right things, that is such a manicured
you got to keep it up.
Persona. You got to keep it up.
You got to keep it up.
Right?
Good luck.
And so much of our life is manicured success, manicured and manufactured success. So the kind of, and I would also say there's something about the world in which we live in that we've confused transparency for biblical vulnerability.
Yeah, tell us what you mean by that.
Yeah, people will share the most transparent things on social media. But that's not biblical vulnerability. Transparency is that might just be, the voyeurism and exposing yourself in order to get clicks. Sharing a story in, I could be doing this very thing right now with you on this podcast, sharing stories about the tingling in my hand, or, feelings of inadequacy, or the accusation of Satan. That's transparency. And I have plenty of other things I could be transparent about. You can make a whole industry out of leadership in sharing anecdotes of transparency that make for good sermon illustrations or book material or social media feeds. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the vulnerability that really says to another person, this is what I shared in public, but I actually need you to help me get out of this. I actually need you to speak into my life, and I need to pay attention that you have actually something very important to contribute. So transparency just gets stuff off our chest, and maybe in the worst case scenario is manipulated in order to advance our persona. Vulnerability is the sort of independence that the Bible describes, that says when one part of the body suffers, the whole body suffers. That we weep with those who weep, we rejoice with those who rejoice. That we are able to say that I am not able to truly know and be loved by God until I have found it mediated through this flesh and blood community of fellow followers of Jesus that enable me to understand the incarnation. That's a whole nother level. It's what Jesus did when he went to the Garden of Gethsemane, and he invited Peter, James, and John to come and pray with him. And he was heartbroken that they couldn't stay up with him. This is the Son of God. And he said, I need you to pray for me. And he was heartbroken that they couldn't stay up. That is vulnerability. That is an interdependence where you actually can be truly hurt when someone doesn't rise up to the occasion and meet you. That's very different from the kind of social media transparency that we often see.
Yeah, I love just thinking through it that way. And that's a great test for motives. I think for all of us to do a little bit of that self-reflection of what is this sharing? What is the heart behind it? That's really good. I'm also curious too, in addition to, I think one of the big questions is the who that we were talking about, but then also how about leadership in the context of, your marriage, doing a lot. I know there's a lot of people who would be listening who, life and ministry are in very much, I know I feel this way with my wife, Brittany, but it's like as a team. And so whether the spouse of the leader is directly involved in the ministry or not, it's very much a team effort in the work that we're doing. And so I think sometimes too, that question of like, what does it look like for us as a ministry couple or as a couple, maybe even outside of the ministry, to have those kinds of friends? That's another difficult question that I know comes up at times.
Yeah. It's really a challenge to, again, find friendships that you resonate with as individuals, much less as a couple. If you're a married couple seeking for a friendship. So I come back and say, do not underestimate the power of commitment and humility. When you combine that with vulnerability, that is a recipe for friendship. You don't get to choose many things in life, right? Your family, you're just born into it. And there's a reason why the Christian body is often described as brothers and sisters, as the family of God. It's like you are born into a family physically that you didn't get to choose, and you're reborn into a spiritual family that you don't get to choose. I do think the consumerism of American Christianity, where you can hop from church to church and have disposable friendships as well as disposable communities, or that has some damaging impact on us because the selection of friendship that Jesus put together in his disciples, getting a zealot and a tax collector and saying, hey, I want you to go 2 by 2 and your life depends on each other. Go out there, right? This is extraordinary that God would call us to cultivate friendships. I think of Jonathan and David. Here's a friendship that had to overcome family opposition. The father deeply opposed to friendship. It actually had to overcome potential rivalry. David's ascendancy meant that Jonathan would not get the throne. All sorts of opposition. Distance, right? David was on the run for much of their friendship. But they chose to be in a covenant friendship with each other. They chose to say things like, may God judge me if I ever blah, 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 right? And this is like in 1 Samuel 20. This is a beautiful picture of God's covenant toward us, to see the covenant that Jonathan and David had for one another. The rabbis used to call this the ideal friendship, that all friendships should be modeled after. So, when I think about all that work as a couple, what are the challenges? Well, the challenges, is this a transactional friendship? Do they want to be our friends merely because of ministry expediency? Will we all get along? Will the various permutations of the couple get along? Can we talk about things other than ministry? All those things that might be question marks that, once again, you might just hope would magically fall into place. Lord bless you with something like that. But by and large, even if the Lord blesses you, if we don't learn the hard work of listening well, of being vulnerable, of shifting conversations to deep and important issues beyond the transactional, then we're not going to have those friendships. And we need those friendships, right? We need multiple types of friendships. Of course, we need the mentor, coaches, basically. Of course, we need people who are our peers that we could share and swap mutual concerns and challenges in leadership. Of course, they're mentees, people who we should be building into. But we definitely need to have people in our lives for whom their primary way of understanding us is as fellow followers of Jesus, that we are entering into this covenanted relationship that is not expedient, that will take work, and we're going to intentionally cultivate.
Well, I just have to say, you've been a very good friend to me today, because I know I'm probably throwing some tough ones at you, but you're doing just great, sharing so much wisdom from Scripture, from life experience. I think of one other challenging question. You've already touched on this a little bit, but also, what does it look like for leaders to diagnose, like, when is a relationship no longer life-giving? Like, when does it kind of come to a place where it's time to let go? Like, it's time to move on from a relationship. How do we diagnose that?
Yeah. Wow. You are not sparing me from these
like
projects.
I told you, you've been a great friend, So whatever reflections you have.
Yeah. I'm going to use a ministry example in Scripture. So Acts 13 introduces this kind of tension that Paul and Barnabas, who have this amazing relationship, right? Deeply affectionate, and I imagine like a friendship, a ministry partnership, like without comparison in the earliest church. And then they ran into this deep conflict. John Mark had gone with them on the first missionary journey, and in a second missionary journey, they were considering taking him again. And because John Mark had left them first time around, Paul said, "No, I can't trust him." And Barnabas said, "No, he needs a second chance." And the disagreement was so strong that they parted ways. All right. Wow. I mean, we're talking about Paul and Barnabas, and they couldn't see eye to eye.
Yeah.
And how do we even determine who is the right one? The importance of the mission. Paul, yeah, we have to affirm that. The importance of second chances. Barnabas, yeah, we also have to affirm that. There are occasions where a parting is not even on the basis of something sour. It's on the basis of something deeply convictional. And I set that up because I would say, one, that there are occasions where we need to consider God's call on us into different domains of life and experience, which will open up different domains of friendship. Right? So there may be just circumstances. I hope if you move to a new city that you won't just still be pining for the old city you left, but you would actually make friends in this new city. It is an easy thing in geographical locations to say, "Oh, I need a new set of friends." And the old set of friends will still stay in touch, but it will be not in the same way. I think the same thing can be said in non-geographical ways, that we have a different call in life and we're moving in different directions the Lord has called us, and we need to follow that and recognize that certain sets of relationships will need to shift, and we need to be open to that. There are times in which, of course, relationships become toxic. And this is where I get back to my original question of, are you the right person? And are you developing a friendship that grows with you? And even then, I would say, don't do this too quickly, because, a friend loves at all times. A brother is born for adversity, as the Proverbs would tell us. And so we often quit too soon. But there are times where we will need to part ways, not just because we're called in different directions, but we're called to be a different kind of person. And this person really is actually having a deeply toxic influence. I don't want to just use pop psychology, terms that maybe get misused, but is not an iron sharpening iron. Is becoming a place of accusation, and a person who's no longer growing with you. I think that's a deep concern. Having said all of that, I do want to say in 2 Timothy, Paul asks for presumably the same John Mark to visit him when he is in prison. So somewhere along the line, he was reconciled with Mark. And not only reconciled, when push came to shove and his life was on the line and he wanted someone to bring some help to him and encouragement to him in prison, he asked for Mark to come. And I find
amazing.
that a beautiful picture. So having everything that I've just said about sometimes life brings you in different directions, sometimes discipleship will require you to part ways with a person, to always also be open to the possibility of restoration.
Yeah, and time. I think that is so key. Give things time. Well, it's all well-founded because those are all biblical ideas and principles, a great framework for answering that question. So I guess, we've covered a lot of ground. We are going to let you off the hook here.
This is good.
You've been in the hot seat, but just to kind of bring it all to a close and just thinking about the leader who's listening and, have heard this conversation, maybe they've been stirred in their hearts about reigniting a desire for friendship. Maybe that's been missing. Maybe this has been an area of struggle over a period of time. But those who are kind of yearning for these kinds of spiritual friendships that we've been talking about today, but maybe they find themselves struggling in some way, what would be just kind of one next step? What would be one thing that you would recommend for those who have that desire?
Mm-hmm. Make a choice and begin the work. I would say do not wait for perfection. Do not presume of a perfect fit. Do not expect that all the pieces will match. Choose because it is a need in your life. It is a call of God. I mean, again, Jesus himself, the Son of God, modeled the need for friendship. Jesus himself said, I no longer call you servants, but I call you friends. It is deeply a matter of discipleship that leaders should have these kinds of friendships. And it's an existential need. You will just need this. So, cultivate a relationship in which you appreciate, but don't have a need to impress, in which you will take the time and actually help the person become a better friend to you, of talking about that. I think we need to think about our friendships like we would a marriage. And that is, we expect marriages to take time, effort, energy. We expect marriages to have ebbs and flows, but we remain committed to growing in it. And a friendship should be that way. It too is a covenanted relationship in Christ. It too will require prayer, cultivation, vulnerability, work. And we really ought to not wait for perfection before we begin it, because the process is what perfects it. All right. Friendship will be sanctified just like you are being sanctified. It is a process.
It's messy.
It's messy.
In one word, it is messy, but it is the model.
Yeah.
It's the model of what God has called us to. This is what he's chosen, in a lot of ways to allow us to become more like him. So those are great words, make a choice, begin the work. And I appreciate, Walter, how you reminded us today that a lot of that work begins with us.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for all the wisdom that you've shared with us today. We really appreciate you, all the great work that you are doing and also that NAE is doing.
Thank you, Michael, very, very much for this conversation and for helping me remember the importance of friendship.
So good. Well, hey, we need to have lunch again soon. This is a reminder.
Let's
get
make
that on
happen.
the calendar. We'll do it. Yeah. All right. Thanks again.
Peace.
Thanks for joining us for the Behind the Seal podcast. If today's episode challenged you, share it with someone and start a conversation. We'll see you next time.